the record button.
Okay.
I can do that too.
Perfect. As long as you know what's up, that's perfect.
Yep. It's all good.
All right. Well, let me wire up our presentation here. I've got that open, and we'll get on into it.
All right. Well, we are now live on Facebook, and
Cool.
I'm gonna go ahead and let's see if I can find the record button somewhere around here. Where can I find the record button around here? That's a great question. I can't seem to have found the record
Yeah,
button.
I know. Sometimes it's like in the menu. I'm like, where is it? And I'm not going to hassle Zoom too much, but they just change things, and you're like,
They just changed
okay, I got to figure it out. All right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This is going to record itself on Facebook. So
Okay.
I'm just going to
We
go
can share that
ahead
link too.
and get it off from there. So that is right, all of you. You have heard it correctly. We will be recording this video for posterity, so that if you are interested in learning about the resources and things that we have to offer you, that is entirely possible. But in the meantime, welcome to Recession-Proof Your Job Search in 2023. I am Albert, founder of Albert's List, here with my trusty sidekicks and bosses in their own rights, Elisa Huang and Joe Cardillo. And, we're going to talk about how to find a job in these crazy times, crazy markets. Feel free to raise your hand, throw up a reaction if this has been like the craziest year and possibly the worst year of job hunting for you ever. And you know what? Honestly, if it is, we're here to hopefully help you find some respite, find some relief from it, because we've been helping people find jobs for quite a while, and we're here today to help hopefully find some clarity and some relief in making this a little bit of an easier task. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Joe and Elisa. I'll be in and out. I'll be in the chats, and I look forward to chatting with all of you. So Joe, thank you for coming back as usual. I appreciate you so much. And over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Always a pleasure. And yeah, we're gonna get right into it. I think anyone who's seen me do a webinar knows I go kind of fast, and I try to make sure that we really pack the value in and provide lots of time for Q&A and things like that. So I'm gonna just make it as useful and valuable as possible. Feel free to throw up questions on the, you all know, probably familiar with the Q&A format of Zoom. You can also just put the question in the chat. Periodically, I'm going to pop open the chat and just check to see, what I might be missing. Elisa will usually also kind of nudge me or chime in if I'm missing a question or a great piece of context, because sometimes, when we're chatting with job seekers, you all have used a tool I haven't used, or, you've got expert tips on something, you've got experiences. So we encourage you to take part in that too. Okay, so yeah, let's get into it. If Albert's List is a little bit new to you, I'm not going to give you the full spiel, but we've been around for a decade. We just celebrated 10 years. Of course, Albert's the founder. I've been actually friends with Albert since around 2014. I think I sort of joined the community maybe a year and a half after Albert kicked it off. And yeah, I've been part of it, pretty much since the last 9-ish or so years. We run a lot of events. We do a lot of different kinds of helpful things for job seekers. If you are not familiar with that, I just want to encourage you to, go back to Eventbrite, look up the Albert's List profile, and check out some of the other events that are happening. There's lots of good stuff there that's useful that Albert runs with other folks, career coaches, recruiters, etc. So just make sure to check it out. A fair amount of that stuff is free. We also have some paid offerings too. So, but one of the things I always say is we build around community, right? The way that we approach jobs and careers is through community. And so everything is sort of oriented in that way. It's not transactional. It's about finding ways to support folks. Okay, so here's your two co-leads. I'm on the right, Joe. I help to run the bootcamp, as mentioned. I'm also a moderator for the Albert's List community. And then I run my own business. I've been doing that for almost a couple of years now, coaching and training, helping people build teams, things like that. And then Lisa, do you want to say, hey, since you're on, I know you're on audio, do you want to let the folks know what you're up to?
Yes. Hi, how are you? Hope everyone's having a good night. Sorry, I can't be on video, but I am the co-lead for Bootcamp along with Joe and Albert, and so excited to connect with all of you. And thanks for just spending time with us tonight, just to get hopefully some key tips in your job search, as well as connecting with each other and accountability in the fall. So thanks so much.
Yeah, love that. So let's get into it. Here's kind of the road for tonight. we ran this, I think we first ran this webinar a year and a half ago, which feels like forever. We updated it in January, and then I just, kind of sat down and updated it in August as well. So you're looking at pretty much a current version. Some of the stuff is kind of tried and true. Things like networking don't necessarily change that much, depending on the economy, but other things do, right? Everyone's sort of like AI and, ChatGPT and LLMs and all these other kinds of things. So there are new things in the market, right? And there are also market dynamics. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we sort of get through it. And if you have specific questions on, any of these things kind of hit your interest, definitely chime in. So yeah, let's talk about that first thing. I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot in the job search bootcamp is if you have to make your search organized. I don't think anybody's necessarily going to say, oh, I didn't know that. I think we kind of all intrinsically know that. It's all about finding and tuning your job search so that it's scalable, right? You can make it repeatable and make it work. So, I think this part of it is sort of like relatively straightforward intellectually, but there's a lot of tactical executional things you can do. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of these things that are mentioned here. One thing is just to be really clear about your staging and conversion points. How many people have gotten lost in one day? You put a 1 in the chat if you've sort of had that moment where you're like, oh my God, I have an interview today. I have to apply for a job today. And I also need to prepare for something, fix my resume or whatever it is. Put a 1 in the chat if you're like, I try to do all these things all at once in one day. I feel like we've got a few people saying, yeah, okay, I've been in that mode. And I can relate to that too. I think most people have that feeling. And that's one of the reasons I recommend kind of staging. And so let me just show you what I mean, because it's better to actually take a look at it. And I do a lot of screen share, so you're going to see me sort of pop open the web browser tabs that I've got open as well. So staging your job search is one of the absolute most useful things that you can do. And it helps a lot, because I just want to acknowledge that the reason it's really stressful to try to do an interview in one day while updating your resume, while applying for a job, while messaging people on LinkedIn, is because there's a lot of cognitive load, right? There's a lot of switching those different contexts, even though the amount of time that you might spend is switching from that LinkedIn direct message to potential hiring manager over to, I got to update my resume with, ChatGPT or Bard or whatever you're using. Those are very different things. And so that can be kind of like a lot of cognitive load and stressful, right? And so if you're doing 5 or 6 or 8 of those things in a day, it's very hard to kind of manage. So I recommend, and we talk about this a lot in the bootcamp, I recommend staging and just structuring your time. And one of the best ways to do that is by simply just putting the activities in order for yourself, even though, it's not always chronological, like, days are going to be different, but just, really getting very clear about staging for yourself. So that first stage, just for example, is just finding opportunities. So fine tune that. If you're, for example, if you're passively job searching or you're coming back to a job search after a while off, don't try to do everything all at once. Get that first stage kind of fine tuned, figure out which things on this list will help you organize yourself. And by the way, we have a folder for all of these materials that we use from the job search bootcamp. It's all open source. So whether you're in the bootcamp or not, you're absolutely welcome to use it. And I'll share the link in a sec, but you can just go to File, make a copy. You can download it if you want into format and, put it wherever you want it. You can create a Google Doc copy, etc. So let me pop that over in chat really quick. But I recommend just taking a look through this and kind of seeing, if you make a copy, you can update it for yourself. That's totally fine to change it. But, just make sure that you kind of have your staging sort of sorted out for yourself, because, finding job opportunities, doing early research and screening. Here's a really nice red flag, green flag screening list. If you don't have something like this, it's not that you're going to go through for every single interview that you have, or, potential organization that you might want to work for and, do this huge thing, but it gets really faster, right? You're like, look, red flags, green flags, and you kind of practice and it gets a lot easier for you. So have your own screening list, right? Because that is important to do before you invest a lot of time in interviews. And then, of course, you've got, kind of the standard customizing materials, applying, doing networking around the job. There's some really helpful specific to-dos here. Again, you might make a copy and delete parts of this where you're like, yeah, I don't really want to do this, this particular aspect, or I don't feel like it's relevant. Totally fine. It's, it's your job search, right? You have to do it in a way that works for you, but put it into that checklist format and, stage it for yourself. And so anyway, interview prep, networking and context, negotiating at the very bottom, things like that. Those are things that you can you can very easily kind of go back to it and sort of figure out what works for you. So make sure to stage your job search. I think that's really important. The other thing that I always kind of mention too is just make sure that you're alongside that tracking in a really nice manner. So this is, okay, let me ask, let's get real. Put a 1 in the chat if you've ever set up a job tracker that looks something like this, and then you just forgot about it and never touched it again. I'll put a 1 in the chat myself right now, because I'm like, yes, that's me. I totally created a job tracker and then was like, I never looked at it again. No judgment on that. I've been there. I think we've all been there. Yeah, a couple of folks are like, yeah, overwhelmed, I knew it was there, but I couldn't get to it. Very common. I think the thing about a good job tracker is that it allows you to come back to it and update it. And so I'll show you an example. I actually have this template is one that Selena Mendoza created. Selena's been a long time member of the Alberts List community. She's a product manager, product leader. So her mind, look at this, her mind is organized, right? Her staging is incredibly impressive. My staging is like 3 or 4 stages. Hers is like, they looked at my app, they downloaded my resume. I have an on-site interview. I'm doing a project. I'm currently, things like that. So this article is a great one. And by the way, the presentation, which we'll send out afterwards with PDF, has all the links in it. So you don't necessarily need to kind of copy paste everything, but she has a great kind of setup for how and why she does it. So I'll let you read that on your own time, but there's an Airtable tracker here, which you could kind of mimic in, Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you want. Here's what mine looks like. I'm not really actively job searching. I just sort of occasionally do it to kind of remember the process. I want to know what job seekers are going through. So I occasionally just go through the process and apply to things to see what happens. But the key to a good job tracker is that it should be very easy to come back and add notes. So, and then sort, by staging, sort by the date. You've got all your links, you've got some notes in here. The other thing you can do, with a more interactive version like Airtable is you can actually open it up. Should open. I've got a lot of, there we go. But you can actually kind of see it in like a card format, which I think tends to work really well for folks. I actually am a very conversational person about jobs. So I would actually, a lot of times I put comments in for myself. If you have an Asana board or Trello or Monday.com or anything like that, you've probably done that, right? You can kind of project manage that opportunity for yourself. Like you don't have to go crazy doing all that heavy granular stuff, but just put some comments in like, I know Jan who used to work there. Look her up. It's just great. Now I can come back to it. I don't have to, worry about, okay, HubSpot, gosh, it's in my brain. I'm trying to hold on to that information. So whatever you do with a job tracker, just make sure that you have something that's flexible and easy to use. I will also share a tip, which is that I always tell this to job seekers. I'm like, the reality is that a lot of times you do that staging where you're like, I'm going to find a bunch of opportunities and you put them in here and then you never really apply. Use that to your advantage, right? Rank stack it. If you have 60 things in your job tracker, and you're just like, I just haven't had time to get to that. Well, the ones that you care about should be at the top, right? Top 5, top 8, whatever it might be. So, it's okay to just put stuff in there and don't feel like the cognitive load of, I can't get to all those things. Like however you decide to use it, just keep coming back to it. I think it's an important piece. Let me check the chat really quick, make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, I'll drop, somebody asked about a link to that. Actually, yeah, sorry, 1 second. I should have dropped that in. Job.
So there was a question a while back, just want to make sure
no
Abby mentioned,
Thank you.
which was that LinkedIn makes it harder for, well, they said LinkedIn makes it harder for me to hunt jobs, but I've built enough connections so LinkedIn doesn't mark me as a scam when I send connection requests. So if I'm understanding that question correctly, I don't think, like, you don't need to give that up. So usually when you send connection requests, if you include a quick note, like, great to connect to this webinar, or loved what you wrote about healthcare, AI tools, then people would be apt to accept you. If it's about a specific job, you can also mention that, and they can always, decide to accept or not. But I have found that putting a quick, concise note is acceptable practice.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about that under the networking, just about like kind of what language you can use and how to be, really economic about that. I always recommend keeping it really simple and, just be relevant, right? You know, hey, saw that you did this thing, listen to the podcast, you know, read your blog, really liked your post about whatever, would love to connect. Keep it simple. You don't need to, you know, write a novel or anything like that. Just give them a reference point, because sort of half the job is just to let them know you're an actual person. Because, you know, there's a lot of bots, right, on LinkedIn. And then there's also a lot of people who act like bots. They're transactionally trying to, you know, get sales or get people to buy things. So if you just like take that little tiny bit of personalization, keep it simple, make it relevant, you know, usually that just increases your, you know, your likelihood of the person connecting. And it also just starts off the relationship in a better, friendlier place. And I definitely, you know, kind of recommend that.
Yeah.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
a couple more questions and then we'll move
Yeah, go
along. So someone WM, I'm not seeing the name of it, but it says, is there a link to the template of the job tracker? So Joe just dropped that in there.
Yeah.
I'm also going to drop another job search tool that Lucy Thompson, Albert, myself, and Joe collaborated on. That's another way to jumpstart your job search. I'll drop it in right now. And Joe, if you're able to, feel free to screen share. If not, basically, it's just a way for you
I'll pull that
to.
up.
Okay.
Sorry about that. That one was.
I just put it in the chat if you want to pull it up. I know.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. There we go. Perfect.
But essentially, it's just if you're actively searching, you can go through the tabs, and based on what stage you're at, click on the applicable tab, and it'll have all the resources that's appropriate for it, whether it's a consolidation of all the job boards, another application tracker example by another job search expert, Marissa Marsala, as well as our recruiter list, a couple of other staffing agency contact info, and as well as events and job ops. So that should kick off the job search depending on what stage you're at and what you're looking into. If you want to fine tune the approach, feel free to reach out to Joe and myself.
Yeah, love that. And I like Marissa's template in part because she's sort of like helping you think about how to compare employers. And that's really useful, particularly as you get into the interview stage, and you're just kind of making that sense of like, what's really important to me, right? What's the balance? Because I think a lot of times we kind of get in those and Albert's the master of this, by the way. Like I've seen Albert's scoring sheets for when he's like interviewing at companies in the past, and he's like, well, 118 versus 116. You know, the numbers are close, but there's a particular category of that one org that's it's important to you, right? Like maybe it's really important to you to, you know, have an even-keeled boss who is supportive. That's something you need. You know, maybe you're more independent. That's not that big a deal for you in a particular role. You know, you're going to be sort of in charge of what works for you, but really something like this and kind of helping you rank, you know, and it just gives you good context, and not just for today and this job search, for the future and things like that. So that could be really helpful as well. Okay, so to finish off kind of a little bit of the organization piece, one other thing I just wanted to mention too, and I'll share a link to this jobs. This is a kind of an example job search calendar. I'll pop up in a couple of things so you can take a look at it in a sec. Shareable link. You can actually copy this calendar if you want. It's just kind of like a Google Calendar I made because I was sort of like, well, let me show job seekers how to structure time. Now, you're not going to spend 40 hours a week on a job search, so this is a little over the top from a visual perspective. But just as a couple of examples, you know, you might have a list of places that you look for jobs. One of them, there we go. One of them is Albert's List. Hopefully, there's an Albert's List Facebook group. If you're not in it, of course, you can join that. But you know, maybe there's specific niche job boards that you like. Maybe there's newsletters that you want to go to. Maybe you really like Well-Found. You know, that used to be Angel List, kind of a jobs listing spot for startups in tech. But also maybe you keep your own, you know, on your job tracker. Maybe you have your own tab for companies that you want to pay attention to, or it could be in a spreadsheet or whatever. You know, when you're organizing your search, organize your time and your search in a way that allows you to go directly to that thing. And so I always tell people, like, put that in, you know, if you're a person who likes calendars, put that in your calendar. If you're a person who likes, you know, software or a Google Doc or whatever it might be, or emailing yourself, you know, hey, no, everybody uses different stuff. Make it really easy and bite-sized for yourself to go do that activity for that time, whether it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it is. So this links right to it. And I also just wanted to mention, you can get really sort of crafty and granular. If you don't know Tech Jobs for Good, it's kind of a cool jobs board. It is what it sounds like. It's social impact oriented, but a lot of job boards, newsletters, things like that have specific sections, and you can't see it perfectly, but if you look up at the URL at the top, I've actually added this tag, design and UX, and then it's just built into the URL, and that's what's copied and then put into the calendar invite. So I'm not scanning this general board. I'm actually going right to the section for design and UX to see, and I usually, everybody sorts it different, but I support, I resort it by date. So bam, right to that link where I'm seeing stuff that's posted in the last week on this job board in this category. So that level of just taking a little bit of time to kind of like get your organization together, I think is something that can be really helpful. Other things that you can do is sort of like, build in, time to do admin stuff like checking or clearing your email once a day, or, things like that. I also recommend putting in a nice little block for your job tracker. You don't have to do it every day, but it might be 30 minutes twice a week. Make time for that kind of activity. That's something that can be really helpful and useful. You might also put in, time to do a little catch up with other job seekers. It helps to have peers in the job search. That's really helpful. And then you might structure your time for applying to roles and things like that. Again, mileage will vary. Everybody's going to do this differently, but you could sort of use this as a model to help yourself, kind of get focused or organized in a way that works really well. And here's the calendar link. I'll drop that right into chat. It's a big old long URL, but it should get you there. If it doesn't, just put a note in the chat and let me know. So I think these kinds of things can be really helpful from from kind of an organizational aspect. And I just want to acknowledge, I think people have very different kind of styles in how they use time and how they track things. And so that really was just sort of the last thing I was going to mention, is just make sure to review and update your habits as you go along, right? Again, don't penalize yourself when you're like, oh, I haven't been in my job tracker forever. I haven't been using my calendar. Okay, that's cool. It happens. Maybe this week you're not going to get the things done you want done. You kind of, let me adjust my calendar for next week, right? Because you can always go in and change, what's on your calendar. So just kind of keep coming back to it, keep spending time on that. And that's a validation for you that you matter, and it's important for you to take care of yourself as you go through the job search, because meditation can be a priority, right? It's not just about the literal tactical things. It's about taking care of yourself and being as well as you can and being healthy. Okay, let me make sure I didn't miss any questions before I cruise right along. Someone had a good question. Do you have any advice for marketing niche skills? Individuals transitioning out of broadcast journalism and having a hard time securing interviews. Companies see news and don't really see that translation to communications, PR roles. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we're actually going to talk a little bit about that from a positioning perspective. So let me come back to that. I'm going to just mark to myself PR and comms, transition from news to PR and comms. We'll talk about that move. And I've actually talked a lot and seen a lot of people make that move. It's a pretty specific one. So coming back to that, good question. Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to mention too, when you think about organization, is just AI tools are really big. Everybody here, how many people just tell me in the chat if you've used anything, like, do you use ChatGPT, Bard? Do you use JobScan? It'd be interesting to see what tools folks are typically using, and then I'll pop up a couple that we're currently seeing a lot of people use. One is Teal. I don't know if anybody's used Teal. There's some AI aspects that are there, but a lot of it is a little bit more on the organizational side, and I think they're going to keep adding AI elements too. Okay, a lot of people are using ChatGPT. We've got a little bit of JobScan. Yeah, cool. Yep, GPT and LinkedIn AI. Yep, I just started playing with LinkedIn AI a little bit just to see what that's like. Yeah, okay, cool. Teal, ChatGPT, Bard, Apollo. Oh, I'll have to look that up. I haven't used Apollo. Very cool. Mostly GPT, but sometimes Wansulting. Big fan of Wansulting. Awesome. Yes, love their work. Okay, cool. So y'all are playing with it. That's good. For folks who aren't, I think it is worth kind of getting in the game a little bit and playing with it. Teal is a really good way to start doing job tracking. There's an extension if you like being able to click to add a job to your tracker right from your browser. That's a way to do it. And they're starting to do more staging and AI oriented stuff. And you can do a little bit of kind of CRM, contact management, and things like that. You can watch people and companies. So I think that's something that's really helpful. A couple of other tools that are common, Kick Resume is another one that comes up a lot. And I would say one of the things that you can do is you can think about the staging a little bit, like, because this is sort of the big picture best advice that I can give you about if you choose to use AI tools is use them strategically. Don't let them do all the work. And there's different reasons for that. One of the reasons is that AI just sort of is not very well built or designed in some cases. So if you're like, hey, ChatGPT, can you build me a resume for a product manager and make it really cool and impressive? It's going to give you a cool and impressive resume, but it might bullshit a little bit, just to be direct, right? And I think we're seeing a lot of those kinds of challenges come up. So I think being really strategic about when and where you use it, rather than going in and just saying like, I'm going to upload my resume, can you rewrite it? Go in and say like, okay, I know I'm not good at impact points, like, kind of I drove the XYZ growth. So let me just like draft it and then say, hey, ChatGPT, can you reword this to be a little bit more, I don't know, feel a little punchier, a little stronger. Use it strategically in specific ways for specific things. That not only helps you, but it also makes it easier to fact check for accuracy, right? Because sometimes it'll just make stuff up, which is, kind of a problem. And it's hard to spot that if you're just letting it do all the work, by itself. So Kick Resume is a good one you can play with for resumes. I'm a big fan of JobScan. They do a lot of interesting matching. It's not 100%, accurate. I also really like this article that Zapier created, I think late last year, and they updated it not too long ago. I'll drop that in the chat here as well. They have a really nice overview, and it's actually kind of built in that staging manner where they're sort of talking about using AI to do some resume building, drafting and formatting your resume. And they talk a little bit about kind of using it strategically in this article. They also talk a little bit about matching tools. So that's sort of like a little further in the funnel. They talk about, resume optimization for specific roles and things like that. They talk about the cover letter generator piece, lots of things like that. I also really like this. I don't use this because I'm not a big fan of ChatGPT, but you can use GPT Google Sheets to actually generate specific messages for networking. This is another example of cool, use the tool, but be careful. Don't just sort of let it run wild. You need to be really strategic about the way that you use it, depending on where you're putting it into action. So anyway, good article, lots of good stuff in that that I think is pretty useful and hopefully helpful. Let's see, and then I'm just sort of checking back on the chat and the questions. Megan asked, how do you identify keywords from job descriptions to include in your resume, or is it the action words? I think JobScan tends to be a good way to learn how to do that. Typically what you're looking to do is to figure out what the most important, words and phrases are to that role in the job description. And there's sort of hard skills versus soft skills. So what I almost always recommend, if you haven't, is just making sure, to practice that a little bit. Like, I'm not going to open it up because it'll take forever to load, but get your resume, find a job description you like, put it in JobScan, and it'll actually say, well, here's the words you have that match. Here's the important words and phrases that you don't have that you probably need to add. And I recommend doing that, with, it depends on your job search strategy, but I recommend doing that with most applications, unless you're like trying to churn through 1,000 a month or something like that. Depends on your strategy a little bit. It's usually worth the 5 to 8 minutes to just kind of check those phrases and words to make sure that you're not missing anything. The other thing about organization is if you're going to do that, you have to have, be really good at Google Docs and kind of have folders and things like that for different variations. You also seem to you might have to use, Teal or something like that, where you can kind of download update it, download a version, apply, move along, right? You had to have some kind of functional way to structure your search to be easy. And by the way, job search there is a free version. Of course, there's a premium version that you can use too. But I don't even use the premium version. I think the free version will give you just enough a little bit for that first application typically. And the freemium thing is sort of pretty common. A lot of these tools, because they want to get people to use them, tend to have a freemium version where you can use it a little bit, and then maybe they make you sign up, and then they get you use it a little bit more, and then they charge you, right? So there's usually a variation that you can do. And if you really don't have the budget or don't want to spend it, you can also set up a separate email or use private browser or something like that to kind of extend your life a little bit with freemium. That's kind of another way to do it. And I think, by the way, I think those tools everybody's a little bit different about it. Okay, so let's cruise through it and get into strategy number 2. I call this sort of look for the riches in the niches. This is a bit of marketing speak, but basically people who are highly attuned to SEO know that, we call it sort of long tail versus short tail keywords. I'm not going to get into SEO stuff. I had a marketing background in the past, but anyway, long story short, the goal of kind of finding niche opportunities is to be specific, but not too specific. And, so here's an example, right? Series B, social impact startups with no layoffs. That might be a little too granular, but it's decent. And what you want to do is hit that sweet spot of like, okay, there's a fair amount of job postings, there's a fair amount of opportunities in the space, but it's not overwhelming. And, I understand why people say something like, well, I'm looking for a job and I could be a product manager in pretty much any company, or I could, work on support, or I'm actually pretty good at engineering, so I could do engineering, or I could be a project manager, or people are sort of like any of these 70 things. And I think the challenge there is that it's hard to keep your search focused, and it's hard for other people to know what you're looking for. And those two things are a pretty serious factor in the job search. So be specific, but not too specific. So let me just show you an example. If you're not familiar with Shani Ben-Zur, Shani is great. I think actually just finished working at Crunchbase for many years, and has this really great article on LinkedIn, which I will drop into the chat here as well, about how to use the filters on Crunchbase. They've got millions of companies in their database, and they actually you can actually search, filter by who's hiring right now, and it connects to Greenhouse and Lever and some other job boards. I'm not sure how they integrate it, but they've got it integrated somehow. But you can also do some really specific stuff, right? Like a lot of databases you can filter by, are they funded? Do they have a funding round? Do they have layoffs reported? That's not a perfect thing, but a good sense of that. You can also see, it's another way you can make target lists and save searches, and, you can see latest articles about the company and things like that. So using the advanced search, I think in Crunchbase is a really good thing. You can also do that a lot with LinkedIn, which I'll show you another example of in a bit. But, just be specific, right? Like find some niches, and it's okay to have, individual, you could have 4 or 5 sort of targets like this. This is pretty niche, but, be specific about it, know where you're looking for those jobs and opportunities, know where those people hang out, whether it's LinkedIn or a particular Slack group or community or Facebook group or whatever it is. Like build your search for each role that you're going after that's specific around, kind of around that level of specificity. Because, if you follow those people on LinkedIn, eventually you're going to see their job opportunities pop up. If you, find a way to communicate with them via a Slack group that they're really active and passionate about, or, another online group, chances are that gives you a little edge, right? Not only on seeing the job, but also on, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember you from the something. It just gives you that relevant piece. You can also use tools. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I think people sometimes forget about these 3 things. So I like to mention them. Yahoo Finance. Sorry, if you can hear any noise, my dog is popping around the room. Yahoo Finance has, they do public company earnings every quarter. There's a whole ton of news releases. That's not a bad way to find companies to see that are healthy financially, or whatnot. And if you are applying to larger corporate situations, you're going to want to scan that too, because, in the earnings calls and releases, although you may not be as excited about it as I am. I used to be a business reporter back in the day. I think it's interesting, but you can still see like, well, which products, does Cisco have that are actually doing well versus the ones that are like not making as much money. That's in their financial, for public companies, that's in their earnings releases. You can see that. So if you're applying for a job at one division or unit, you can get a sense of what's what. You can also find companies that way. I also like, I think newswires, which are no longer that big a deal, but you can still see a lot of news releases to get a sense of, companies by category that you could put on your, your watch list to find opportunities. And then Google Alerts. I think a lot of people don't use them to a high degree of specificity, but this is another thing you can kind of practice is, is to look for queries that are a little more specific. You can set up that Google alert. You can always change it, right, and update it if it's not bringing it back. And that could be anywhere from, looking for companies that get funded, if it's startups that you're into. It could be just sort of looking up category stuff like this that allows you to be like, oh, cool, who are the competitors to Headspace, right? I don't know. I'm not sure the answer to that. But if Headspace is a potential company you'd like to work at, then maybe there are other people in the space too, right? And you can sort of find them using Google Alerts and things like that. And by the way, I think another thing that you can kind of do in your search to be proactive is to sort of find those niches and then save those places and keep track. So here's an example. Yours is going to vary. This is my list of job boards. This is on my website. I'll drop it into the chat if you would like it. Feel free to copy anything here. This is actually an additional page I have that has resources for job seekers. It's just a lot of a lot of the stuff that we do with Albert's list is actually in here or linked. But this list of job boards, this is about 25 that I have. And I update it a couple times a month. I add stuff, I remove stuff if it gets scammy or spammy. I curate pretty heavily, so most of the stuff is pretty high quality. And I've been curating it for a few years. So there's Tech Jobs for Good, which I mentioned earlier. There's a couple of newsletters in here for freelance stuff, contract stuff. So, copy this if you want, but make sure you have a list of places, and you could put this in your calendar or your Google Doc or your Asana board or whatever it is that you're using to track. This just makes your process faster and smoother. I think that's something I definitely recommend, is kind of getting really focused in the niche piece. Okay, so let me check the chat here. And at least if you caught anything, feel free to chime in too.
Mostly questions in the Q&A, but they've all been answered, so folks can check it out if you want to read through what's been asked.
Oh, good. Thank you for adding that. Excellent. Yep, I see some good answers to those too. By the way, I think one of the things too about finding jobs is to think about balancing your portfolio of how much are you just applying to sort of LinkedIn and Indeed.com and ZipRecruiter, where you're getting all these notifications, versus being more proactive, right, to find the niche stuff. It's kind of a different strategy, and I don't have a particular orientation towards what your balance should be, but just I would say this is very, very accurate right now in this market. Kind of recession-proof yourself, balance your portfolio. If 100% of your time is just responding to cold, doing cold applications to job postings, you need to add something else. First of all, it's frustrating. Second of all, it's just a tough market right now. So you need to kind of diversify a little bit of your approach. I think that's generally a piece of feedback I would give for this market. Okay, so let's talk about strategy number 3. This actually goes back to a question that I think CC asked, and I'll kind of touch on that too, about transitioning, your skills that you might have from one industry or one area to another. I think this is something that is really powerful. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Data is a great example. Find me a business that doesn't use data today or isn't trying to use data. And I'll find you a business that isn't sure why it's successful or why it's not successful, right? I mean, I think pretty much everybody understands that, data is one of the core foundational pieces, but we don't always think about all of the ways that we have those skills already. So you don't necessarily need to be a data analyst or a data science to highlight a skill, because there's all these things like data gathering, right? That's like surveys, that's database, going in and looking at data in databases, that's market research type stuff. That's gathering the data. There's also formatting, right? Which is structuring data. That's a whole job too. Hygiene, cleaning up data. And then you've got the front end, which is more like presenting it, analyzing it, talking about what it means and why, comparing quantitative versus qualitative. Those are all really kind of niche parts of the data set of skills. And so I'll give you an example and say that, let's say you're like, I'm not a data science person or a data analyst. I don't have a lot of data in my background. Well, let's say you worked on a support team for a couple of years, and one of your jobs was to pull reports from Zendesk or another, or look at reports from Zendesk or another piece of software and, kind of analyze what was working, what trends were happening, what people were asking about, customers, users, et cetera. Well, that's data, right? You may have been doing one of these things with that data, but that's a thing that you can position yourself, right? Even if in your, in the way you position yourself today, you're like, I don't really use data. Well, look for those places where you have access to that, and then add those skills if you can, right? If you're in a job right now and you're like, oh, well, I guess I could probably do something like that with my current job, then go look for that opportunity because it's going to add value. And I also mentioned there's an example too. We were talking about kind of what data jobs might be recession-proof. This super varies, but if you haven't seen Hannah Morgan's site, the Career Sherpa blog, this is lovely. I'll drop it in the chat as well. Really big fan of Hannah and her stuff. Definitely, I'm not out here shilling for her newsletter, but I subscribed, and I think the posts are great. So I definitely recommend checking it out. But, places where there's a lot of data and it's kind of recession proof, obviously healthcare, people are not going to sort of stop needing healthcare. The government can be a place, law enforcement can be a place, and then, core services, first responder stuff, firefighters, things like that. And then there's jobs around this, right? Like pharmacy, I like the pharmacy example because, there are companies that have to provide data analysis around pharmacy work, right? Even, pharmacists aren't crunching all the numbers themselves, they're trying to do their job. So things like that can be really helpful to think about as like, what industries really need a lot of data and have support roles for that data that are not just data science, some stuff that's really important, but kind of niche and not necessarily the easiest to get into or, or to kind of accentuate in your work. So that's an example. Another example is remote and hybrid work communication. When we were working on this presentation, maybe like a year and a half ago, everybody was going remote, or at least was kind of at that just post the place when everybody was doing remote work. And that was the big thing. Of course, now hybrid work seems to be a big deal. But the reality is, as we're all seeing, there's these weird policies around remote work and hybrid work and flexible work. Look, companies are going to have to figure this stuff out because it's not going back in the box. I'm sorry to say it. Actually, I'm not sorry to say it at all. I love it. I think, remote and flexible work is where it's at. I want parents to be able to drop off their kids at soccer and not be sitting in, in rush hour traffic for an hour. I think that's great. Make it easier. Leave the office early. Don't go in that day, whatever the case might be. But anyway, long story short, this is an example of a skill set that's really useful and important. And so positioning yourself to be someone who's like, yeah, well, actually in my last role, even though I wasn't officially the person who did all of the tool selection or management, I actually influenced the way our strategy for how we used Asana and Google Docs together or something like that. That can be a positioning point. So let me give you just an example of what that positioning might look like. Here's sort of 3 statements. One's about, project management. One's about kind of support and data as mentioned. And one's about marketing and being data informed. And so you're kind of repositioning yourself a little bit in these cases. And so I do want to go back to the thing that Cece said too, which is, and I like that example of working in the newsroom and then going to get into PR and comms. Look, one of the primary functions of PR and comms is to get coverage and to have to write stories, right? To get narratives written. So how do you generate narratives as a journalist? Like, talk about that. Like, here's a positioning piece potentially. I'm just putting this out top of my head, so don't quote me on it. But like experienced at doing story research and narrative creation. And if you can get an impact point, right? Like typically drive 15 plus stories a month or whatever your stuff. Well, it depends on the publication you're at, of course. Some do really short clips and high volume versus that, but whatever it is anyway. But use that positioning for yourself, because like a lot of times the transition of the keywords, finding and researching and reporting stories is how we call it in the newsroom. But when we're, in marketing and content and PR and comms, we talk about narratives and, narrative strategy, content strategy. So just find that bridge, right? And then talk about that aspect. I think that can help quite a bit. And so that actually leads kind of into strategy number 4, which is translating, tech skills to government nonprofits. That's kind of related. I think one of the things that can happen is that we don't always think about the variety and depth of places that we could be working with the skill set that we have. And so like, I actually recommend, especially if you're switching industries or you're kind of switching roles, don't just use traditional sites to find jobs, use it to find people. It's a research opportunity. First and foremost, if you're trying to go from private industry working in tech or startups to working in government, like maybe at the city of San Francisco or city, county, or, federal level, or maybe you want to get into nonprofits or something like that, find somebody who's done it. And there's everybody's on LinkedIn pretty much with a few exceptions. They might not be active, but you can still see their track and go, oh, that's interesting. They tried to do that. But find somebody who's done what you're trying to do. Because typically the habits and norms, like in government, for example, are very different. There are a lot of government jobs that just don't get hired for. They go unfilled because the people who work in government are not necessarily networking in the way that the tech industry is used. But if you can find one person who works at the U.S. Forest Service, and that's a place you want to maybe go work as an analyst or whatever, that person could tell you, well, look, these regions or these units operate this way. Kind of here's how I got into it. Here's some of the people that lead these teams. Like they'll give you intel and insights. And so I always recommend finding someone who's sort of done what you're trying to do. I think that's really a pretty smart thing to do. Okay, one other great question in the Q&A that I'll, well, at least it looks like you might be typing an answer, but I'll give a little bit of an answer to you just in case is, would you recommend messaging employees after applying to a job at their company for an informational interview or to just express interest? Yeah, we'll talk about networking for sure. I like that. So Lisa, you answer that one and then I'll tap back on that example as well. And by the way,
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
No,
I'll just close the loop there. Buket asked a question about a role that he or she was really interested in applying for. And I can certainly understand wanting to apply for the job ASAP, because usually like if you apply within 24 hours or a certain period of time, you can potentially get selected in the first wave for interviews. Maybe that can give you a slight bump. But we've also found that if you can go through the approach of messaging employees or connections for a referral, or just getting more insight, then that strengthens your candidacy. And also with a referral, that'll prioritize your application in the system. I've actually like never gotten any of my prior jobs without that approach. So that's like the Elisa POV, but there's so many different ways to tackle the job search. Like Joe, Albert have their own thoughts. So, and that's something we tackle in the boot camp as well, because there's a lot of different ways to get to that dream job. But I just wanted to share one perspective.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think, and I'll talk about that too, but I think it doesn't hurt. It's extra base hits is kind of the way I look at it. And I'm not going to get into it, but there's a link here to the Diego Granados did a while back. I'll share the link really quick. You can check. We sort of talks about like how to find hiring managers on LinkedIn. This is tried and true. I've seen this work for a lot of people, so definitely recommend taking a peek at it too. But yeah, I mean, I think finding people, you have to find your own style a little bit for that. Everybody's a little different, but I definitely recommend reaching out. And I think it can be as simple as you apply to the job, you find 5 people who work there on the team or around the team. Okay, there might be a partner team internally. Hey, I'm looking at an opportunity at, GoPro. Noticed you've been there for 1.5 years. I'm actually making a similar transition. Would it be okay if I asked you a quick question? Keep it short, keep it simple, keep it relevant. Another common question that I tell folks to ask, kind of think about asking is, you can ask like, hey, is it okay if I ask a quick question? Yeah, okay. And then ask a very short question. A great one is, yeah, would you recommend GoPro as a place to work to your friends and family? They can just say yes or no. They don't have to give you any details. So it's a really easy question for them to answer. So it just opens the door. And then if they want to say more, they can say more. So you can develop the conversation. So find things like that allow you to, kind of dig in and, even if and some people are like, I only message people to ask for referrals. I'm like, okay, that can work. That can be part of your portfolio, but I do recommend trying to find a connection point that's not just about, I need something from you right now. Which I think also kind of goes to strategy number 5, which you talk about too. It's about networking, keeping the fires warm. What I just mentioned is what we call the power of small asks, to sort of give and get in small amounts. Most people don't have the attention span anymore. Kudos to you all. We've had like 60 people on a webinar for 50 minutes. I'm blown away. Thank you for hanging out with us. You all have a great attention span. I just want to say, yes, we love you. But we all know most people are like, okay, I can't hang on anything. I can't pay attention to most things. Like, we're all a little fragmented because of our tools and apps. And so, the power of small asks is both respectful to people, especially if you haven't seen them in a while, you don't know them, and, well, it's a past colleague, or maybe, maybe it's totally a cold thing, right? So use that methodology a bit. And by the way, there is, this is another thing I won't get too heavily into, but this is our folder for the 8 weeks to employ job search bootcamp. I hit another link. I'll grab the folder link here in a second and share it with you. all of the materials here are totally open source, and we update them, 2 to 3 times a year typically. Let me see, hold on a sec. What is this? Where's that share button? Oh, I changed my view. Oh, there we go, perfect. Sometimes the views are a little odd. But yeah, everything here is totally open source. You're welcome to make a copy of any of the files. Actually, by the way, this presentation is in there already. So there's the PDF with all the links. If you want it, you can kind of pop in and check it out.
And
but I just
so
want to
I
mention all
think,
these materials are open source, and we welcome people to use them. Go ahead.
yeah, so Joe, I think with that, it's good to know, right? Like, we're really generous here at Albert's List because we know that job searches are hard. And one thing that I appreciate about Joe is that he gives away everything. And so if you literally wanted to just walk away from this webinar today and conduct your own 8-week job search and do it all on your own, it's entirely feasible. You can do it on your own. But as you'll learn in a few moments, sometimes doing it on your own may not necessarily be the easiest way to do it. And so just want to warn you, there's a sales pitch incoming, but it's a very friendly one, and we are going to give it to you because we care about you.
Yeah,
Keep going.
I love you, Albert. You know how I roll. I'm not a salesperson, but we also really care and love this work and care a lot about job seekers. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the run through the webinar. What, Albert, do you want to talk a little bit about the bootcamp model and kind of why we've developed it the way we've developed it? Give them kind of that quick picture.
Yeah, happy to do so. So, so like we realized that a lot of you probably wanted your last job yesterday. We also realize that a lot of you probably find your job search to be overwhelming because it is just a bunch of technology, a bunch of processes, expectation, things that just like you get buried under it, and you wake up the next morning and you're like, do I really want to find another job in this market? And then you look at your credit card statement and you realize you do. And so the average job search that I understand, it goes maybe like 6 months, 5 months. And I'm just not about that. The moment an employer lays me off, the moment I get fired ever, I'm on the job board the very next day. In fact, when I was laid off from my previous employer, I hopped on Albert's List literally like minutes after.
I remember that. Yeah. You're like,
and we had 500 I had interviews the very next day. I was in the conversations, and there were opportunities and offers, really actually in some sense instantaneously, because I had been interviewing prior. But that's the experience number one that I want for all of you who are joining us today, is I want you to be so good at your job search that you can pick from multiple offers, that people know you for who you are, that you are clear on what you are, and that you walk into every single job interview, and the only reason you don't get that interview is because your hair is messy like mine, or that you're wearing the wrong shirt that day, or that the interviewer had something bad for lunch, and it's not because of you. And those are things that I can't even control for either, that we can't even control for here at Albert's List. And so the reason why we do the 8 weeks to employ boot camp on top of the resources that we give out for free is because we understand that job search is in the execution. So to actually get that next job, you need to be able to write the resume, you need to be able to network, you need to be able to interview, negotiate, and so forth. But even more so, job search is what a lot of us do from the lonely confines of our own home offices every single day. And the opportunity to network and have accountability and have community and have lifetime coaching and guidance from me, Elisa, Joe, over what's the video platform you use again, Joe, that you love so much?
Oh, I use Whereby. Yeah, it's kind of a little niche.
Oh, Whereby. I thought it was the other one where you record your screen.
Oh, you talk about Loom. Yeah, I send
Loom, yes. Joe's
quick
famous Loom
snippets. Yeah.
videos. Joe's very famous Loom videos where he puts your resume on screen and does a little 7-minute video, 10-minute video, 20-minute video sometimes if you're special enough to walk you through what's going on. And that's the sanity check in your job search that our 8-week to employed bootcamp offers. And so you get 8 weeks of detailed introductions, you get 8 weeks of various different topics, and you get 8 weeks of industry experts too, beyond us, who have an understanding of how the market looks, how to build your brand, how everything is going on based on their conversations with hiring managers and so forth. And they're willing to come on with us for an hour, hour and a half to discuss it. We assign you homework and we give you that structure that you, if you could do it on your own with your discipline, can do it with us. And then, you know, we do get a lot of really great testimonials out of it too, because there are people who come to our job search boot camp, they leave it and they see more opportunities than ever, or they find their opportunity in the middle of the boot camp and so forth, and all of that. And we just finished our interviewing boot camp a few days ago, and we had a couple of folks who came in feeling underconfident. One of them landed a contract opportunity at Google. Another one of them landed additional interviews. And so we know this stuff works because people put in the effort. They come in week after week, and you come out with those better results. So I know I see, like, I think 5 people have left. I've turned off a few of you with my pitch, but the majority of you are still here. So I must be saying the right things that might be interesting. And so
I can relate to all of it. I'm like, yep, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just throw in my 2 cents here. And Albert kind of put it succinctly. We offer a ton of resources up front because we want you to have everything set for success. But that said, sometimes it's hard for people to find rigor and a process. It's kind of like muscle memory in the job search. And I kind of liken it to working out because I'm a fitness freak. Some people do really well in the 24-hour fitness space where they just go in, crank out their workout and they leave. And that's great for gains. But I myself need kind of the CrossFit environment where I'm seeing regular people, they're asking me how I'm doing, am I increasing the weights, etc. And so I think the boot camp is great for people that need that accountability and meeting regularly and kind of putting themselves on the line there a little bit. So if you want a more customized approach, the boot camp is really perfect for you. There's a lot of questions that the Q&A touched on where they're like, I am in recruiting and I want to go into marketing. How do I go from profit driven to NGOs? Like I'm in broadcast media and now I want to go into, something else. That's something we tackle in boot camp and not something we can just easily answer, which we wish there was more time for that. So please feel free to reach out to us directly on LinkedIn if you want more of support there, office hours. But I highly recommend the boot camp because we tackle a lot of that. And the reason why we can't give you a simple answer is because there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And we'd rather have a conversation and make sure you have the right info. So if you need that community and that accountability and you want to increase your success rate, I think the job boot camp is a good fit for you to push yourself there. If you want more of a hands-on approach, we have tools for you.
Yeah. So I want to just, if you go to the link that's been shared in the webinar chat, general admission for this particular boot camp is $295. If you want a little bit of extra care, which includes coaching one-on-one, I don't know if we're doing office hours this time, but I'm happy to be a part of that if needed. It starts at $395 and goes up to $449. And so if you divide that into 8 weeks, you're paying somewhere between 30 to 35 to 50 bucks a week, which if you divide that even through, it'd be like $5 to $7 a day. And so what you get with that is you get access to our Facebook community. You get access to an exclusive LinkedIn chat just for your cohort. And then you eventually get access to a larger cohort. So we've graduated 60 plus people from this boot camp over the years that we've done it since the beginning of the pandemic. You get more direct access to me, Joe, and Elisa with any of your questions and comments, including anybody we can connect you with. So I know Joe is very connected online with a lot of different decision makers. I have a lot of recruiters who come to me. Elisa's got a lot of recruiters who go to her, and so forth. And you also get the opportunity to do things like mock interviews, which we host weekly, and you can get first dibs on that. We don't do as many premium one-off webinars, but if somehow that comes up during this case, you get some access to that too. And we have other boot camps that are coming up as well, and you can get a discount on those as well. So what we have upcoming for boot camps for the rest of the year include our side hustle boot camp, which starts in early November, where you can learn how to start an Amazon business. And then we also have a personal branding boot camp that starts later. And so I also want to mention another thing. So we did this in our interviewing boot camp, and I'm going to extend it over here because I know a lot of folks are going through a lot of struggles. A lot of folks are going through some different times with their finances because August was really dry. I think I felt it too, because usually I get a lot of random reach outs from recruiters. And even in July. So if you are feeling like you want to do a payment plan, or you want to pay half up front, or you want something specific, reach out to me on my email. I'm just going to go ahead and drop it in the comments here, and we'll work something out.
Yeah, we
And
find a way.
make it worth
So
it for
if
everybody
you're-
around along here.
If you're
So
committed to like getting in and getting used to boot camping and making
just
it
show up
happen,
for the 8
find a way.
weeks.
Yeah.
When you find the success that you will have, because look, if you put in the work, you will succeed. I guarantee it. And share it with other people, and we'll make it work. Sabrina, you're asking, is there a San Francisco Bay Area focus? Not as much as there used to be. Like we thought, we've played around with this being like a technology-based boot camp, but I would say that it's become a more general boot camp in the process because job search kind of transcends everything. So yeah. So what do you all think? Look, Joe and Elisa are some of the most kindest, committed people I know. That's why I brought them
Yeah,
in.
we go hard.
And they go hard.
We're in it for the right reasons. And I always tell people too, I think the one other thing I would say is my dream is that a job search boot camp becomes obsolete and is no longer needed.
Mhm.
I can't see that day happening right now. But that's what we want, right? We want people to have the skill set, the resources, and the experience of practice.
I mean, Joe, Elisa, and I have a text message thread going on every single day, and we talk through who we got to help, how we got to help them, and so forth. And we're trying to find ways to the solutions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I'll wrap us by saying the thing I always say, Albert and Lisa know this too, is the reason we do the boot camp, the reason we run these webinars, the reason we believe strongly in Albert's List as a community is I don't think these things work in isolation. So personally, I'm like, yeah, come join us for the boot camp. We'd love to have you. I think that accountability piece that Albert mentioned really helps. I think it helps us, to have community and to have support and peers and things like that. But that comes from the larger picture, which is don't do it by yourself, right? It's a community, job search is a community sport, community endeavor in a lot of ways. And I think if we're isolated, not only is it harder to kind of churn through the tactical crap we know we're supposed to do as job seekers that are important, but also it's just harder to feel good about it and get momentum and have that kind of accountability.
And the job search is so inane, right? We have the whole thing where you upload your resume and then
you have to type in all your don't even get me started. It's true. A lot of the parts of the job search just don't make any sense. And we do, we vent too, right? As a group, I think each cohort, we have those moments too of kind of support where people are, just able to say, well, that was bananas. Yeah, no, I dealt with that too. And, sometimes blowing off that steam is really an important part of the process too. So, but I never want people to feel that they're supposed to do it alone, because I think it's the nature of a job search is that it is kind of a community endeavor. It is kind of an exercise in connecting with people. And, you don't necessarily have to be the most extroverted person to make it work for you, right? You don't have to be out there networking like a complete genius to make it work. There's different balances and ways to do the job search well. But the important thing is really just to have a community, to have support and have folks that are, in your corner. And that includes, folks like us who do coaching, that includes recruiters and career folks, that includes, peers, people who are going through the job search. Likewise, that includes mentors. And, so having a whole stack of folks around you is important. And we do try to layer that in when we do all of our work too.
Yeah. So Kate asks, my hesitation is I'm on Eastern time and I'm not the best night owl. Your encouragement and resources still resonate so much. If you're willing to start this boot camp at 8 o'clock instead of the usual 9 Eastern, perhaps we could do some accommodation on that. I leave that up to Joe and Elisa though.
Yeah, we also do recordings of everything. So we put, after the day after we send out a recording to the last night, we send out kind of the standard to-dos, assignments, things like that. Here's the next steps. And so, if you're like, I don't think I can make it every Monday night for the next 8 weeks, but you're open to doing, to being able to kind of catch up by, recordings and things like that. That's also an option too. And I also just wanted to mention that I don't know if this is the case for anybody on this webinar, but I know not everybody feels comfortable being identified. Sometimes you have a current employer and you don't want to tip your hat, things like that. We do have folks that just sort of call in and don't use the video function, or maybe they just call in by phone and listen in, but they don't identify themselves. So if you have, typically if you have any kind of needs like that, where there's a privacy concern or anything like that, just let us know. We usually pretty much find a way that works for you, that feels good. And then I think also Sabrina asked in the chat, I've gone through a few layoffs now. Could I still get value from the boot camp?
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there's different
community, and really, job search just keeps changing, right? Like AI, right? You and I didn't talk about ChatGPT at this time last year, but now we do.
Not really. Yeah. Now everybody's using it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. And I think a lot of that is sort of about alignment of your job search. If you've gone through some layoffs and you're like, I would imagine if you've gone through a few, I've been through a few where you're like, I really just want to find a job where I don't have to keep searching for a new job. That can be part of your strategy too, right? Is finding recession-proof opportunities of companies, teams, organizations. We can kind of help you with that top of the funnel strategy. And then also, other things like networking, right? Maybe you decide that you want networking to be a larger component of your job search so that you can hopefully get a little more intel on the places that you do potentially want to work at. You're in the interviews. Well, yeah, let's help you figure out how to read the room. Let's help you find people to reach out to. And that happens a lot. Albert knows, I call that reading the room, and I do a lot of like Loom screen shares and quick voice clips and things like that, where I'm like, tell me where you're interviewing, tell me who the hiring manager is, let me give you a quick read, let's figure it out together. Like, what does that workplace look like? And, is it a place that's stable? Are they churning through employees? Because those places tend to have a lot of layoffs, right? So if you're, for example, trying to get out of that scenario, that's something that we dig into and do a lot of too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know we're at time, so I just wanted to be respectful of everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We went over a lot of material. So the best way to connect with the three of us is via LinkedIn. If you have additional questions, you want to see the course syllabus, you have boot camp questions or about the community, happy to answer all. And I think I put in the LinkedIn connections earlier. So feel free to reach out to us, join the Operas List group as well. And thanks so much.
All right, wonderful. We'll be following up with you on a video for this, and also the link to purchase if you're interested in doing so. And happy to discuss with any of you if there's a specific situation or need, and go from there. Any final thoughts, Joe and Elisa, before I go ahead and hang up?
Oh, I think it was a really great conversation. People had a lot of really great thoughts, feedbacks. People mentioned a couple of new tools that I haven't played with, so I got to go back and play with that too on the AI side of it. And we're looking forward to doing the boot camp. Join us for that if you're ready for that. That's awesome. If you're not ready for that, that's cool. Please stick around and be part of the community and stay in orbit. We're glad to have you. So.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Wonderful. Chat with you all soon, and hope to see you on Monday.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.